like to welcome all of you to the opening of the 8th International Conference on Catholic Social Teaching, Catholic Social Thought, and Management Education. And our theme this year is Renewing Mission and Identity in Catholic Business Education. I'm Brother Raymond Fitz, and I have the pleasure of being the Father Ferree Professor of Social Justice here at the University of Dayton. And along with Michael Naughton, the Moss Chair in Catholic Social Thought and Director of the John A. Ryan Institute for Catholic Social Thought at the University of St. Thomas, I am serving as host. Mike and I are serving as hosts for this particular conference. Now, you all might know, I noticed some of you have been at these conferences for many years. Some of you are new. That's great. We're getting new generations of people coming. Mike has been a great architect of these conferences over the years on Catholic Social Thought and its relationship to business education. And we're very privileged and thankful that we've been able to bring the conference here to the University of Dayton. I'd just like Mike to stand and be recognized. Now, you know that Mike and I are just the front guys for this. I am pleased that I have a great assistant, Judy Keys, and Mike has Mary Kay O'Rourke. Judy, I can see here. Is Mary Kay around too? Would you both stand? Where's Mary? Judy, please stand. Mary Kay's in the back. And if it's successful, they have done all the work that's made it that way. I'd like to ask Dr. Dan Curran, our president, to come and just give a welcome to the University of Dayton. Dan?
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, good morning, everyone, I should say. And welcome to the University of Dayton and to this great event. I'd also like to welcome Cardinal Turkson here and accepting our invitation. And I'd especially like to thank you, Your Eminence, for your homily today and the way you presented the two readings. I have to admit, when I came into Mass today, I was framing it in terms of mission and identity. And the readings from Kings, the individual who stood up for his heritage and said, "This is my property," and then I remembered what Jezebel did, and I said, "This is not about mission and identity." So again, I thank you for reframing that, and certainly the reading from Matthew's, turning the other cheek. I know many of us, when we are talking about mission and identity to our colleagues, to others from outside of our institutions, it seems at times that we turn the other cheek, and really the reading from Matthew is something that we should all take to heart, that I think we face challenging years ahead, and the individuals in this room are committed to the identity of our institutions, our Catholic identity. And it's not an easy thing at times, and it's something that we have to stand firm and strong. And again, this is why a meeting like this is so important. It gives us the opportunity to come together, to talk, to strategize, and to move forward together. Again, Your Eminence, I thank you for reframing that. I did get on a down note, but again, we're here to do something successful. It's an important meeting. It's a very challenging time, and I thank you for being here. And finally, I'd like to add my thanks to Ray, to all those individuals who worked on this conference. We all know that a conference, we walk in for 2 or 3 days to a conference and everything seems to go well. We enjoy it and we walk away. The year or more before the conference, people are working very hard, making decisions, putting in a lot of time. So I'd like to personally thank all the individuals who worked on the various committees to make this a success. So have a wonderful conference, and I hope to see you on campus at some time. Have a great day.
So I know I'm standing between you and lunch and a good meal before you. I will make this short, but my purpose is just to maybe frame a little bit the purposes and the dynamics of our conference. I think we're all aware of the kind of crisis that we have seen in the economy in the United States. We're going to have a war as we approach November about who's at fault here in the economy, but it certainly has has drastic impact on our middle class and on our people that are poor. Corruption in the financial systems, the crisis of European economy, I think all of these bring us to the notion that we need to really create business leaders who are highly principled, who are able to continue to grow in practical wisdom, and who understand the key themes of our Catholic social thought as they relate to the business world and to the development of the human community. So our purpose of being here together is to focus on raising up a generation of business leaders by energizing and by sustaining our efforts to develop mission-driven education in our Catholic universities. As the planning committee, which is in the brochure there, has put together this conference, we wanted to do two things, two ideas that we had. First was to explore how Catholic universities deepen and revitalize their cultures and institutionalize its mission and identity in business education. So looking at the dynamics of organizational culture and the focus on mission and identity. Second is to kind of bring together some of the great ideas that have been fermenting in each of our institutions. So bringing together curricular materials, understanding processes that are important, different models that we have that help us intensify mission and identity of business education in our Catholic universities. We've organized some plenary sessions that I think will be very helpful to us. Today the Cardinal will talk to us about the Catholic social principles and business vocation. I think you will find that he has very thoughtful ideas to say. On the challenge of institutionalizing mission, Don Brio, the Director of Center for Catholic Studies at the University of St. Thomas, and Father James Heft, Marianist, the Alton Brook Professor of Religion and President of the Institute for Advanced Catholic Studies, will lead us in a reflection about the institutionalizing challenges. How do we shape the culture of our institutions for mission and identity? Also, we're going to have a panel of deans talk about the challenges of business education. And finally, the last plenary session is William Sullivan will help us do some rethinking of business education. Dr. Sullivan was one of the principal authors of the Carnegie Foundation study on rethinking undergraduate business education, liberal learning for the professions. I had the opportunity of working with a seminar of faculty members from business and from our College of Arts and Sciences during our first semester, and this book was one of the key pieces that we looked at in terms of how do we take these ideas that are expressed on the reforming of business education and integrating liberal education, and how do we bring the Catholic social tradition and our Catholic mission and identity to that work. It was very helpful, and I think we'll look forward to Dr. Sullivan's. And there's going to be lots of concurrent sessions. They look very exciting, very interesting. I find myself torn. Which one am I going to go to here on some of these? It's very difficult. But again, I think we'll see the fruits of what's happening on innovation on our Catholic colleges and universities with respect to business education. Let me just say a little bit about the dynamics of a conference. If you hang around me long enough on this campus, you know I'll come to the metaphor of conversation. I'm really big that you bring about change by kind of productive and focused conversations. And these are conversations where we really listen to one another, where we can talk with a kind of honesty and openness, and we're going to have an opportunity to bring together the fruits of that conversation. So many of you will be sharing papers on your scholarship. Hopefully we'll be candid with one another on what we think about those kinds of issues, and we will be able to document those as fruits of this particular conference. And so Mike will be putting those on the website for us for further work, and we're going to consider some of them for publication in a special issue of the Journal of Catholic Higher Education. I think it's also important that we learn how to bring the thoughts together that are part of this conference back to our own campus, and how can we align the conversations around mission and identity. It's not just for each one of us to get into our own classroom. We have to bring our colleagues together around this process. And so I'm always encouraging aligning conversations and mobilizing conversations to change the rules of the game. And for us at our campuses, the rules of the game are our curriculum and our faculty development. If we can deal with those two issues, I think we're really going to be able to bring about the kinds of changes that we want to bring about in our institutions. So hopefully this will be a space where you'll have conversations with others who share your passion for really building the mission of our business schools and the business education. But also we have the privilege of having partners from the College of Arts and Sciences with us, looking at the dimensions of liberal education as an important part of that. And I hope one thing you leave the conference with is that we need partners to do this kind of education. We can't do it just in the School of Business. We can't just do it in a College of Arts and Sciences. And as I was thinking about this issue, you know, technology is a part. So our schools of engineering might have to be part of this dialogue. And as I watch in our own community and communities across the country, the business community is driving these cradle-to-grave initiatives to improve education in our communities. You see it all across at least the Midwest and the East. Business community getting involved, and maybe we need to get our schools of education into helping business understand that tremendous work that they're doing. So I just think about partnerships as you work through this whole process, working across the boundaries of our academic departments. I think we also will have conversations that provide us some new ideas. I hope you go away from the conference with something that excites you, something you want to try in the classroom, something you want to bring back to your faculty to re-energize the process of really developing, you know, these principled leaders who are growing continually in practical wisdom and who really appreciate our Catholic tradition and what it has to say about business and about human development. And finally, I think the Cardinal said it very well in his homily today. We're going to be called to be a deeper vocation as people who are educators. We're talking about the vision of the business professional and the vocation of the business professional. I think we need to really ask ourselves, what is our vocation as educators? How do we become disciples? How do we bring about the Word of God, and how do we transform what's taking place in our institutions? So the challenge of discipleship, I hope you think of that as we go through this conference.
We are delighted that he has accepted our invitation to travel to Dayton, Ohio to join us and to share with us his address entitled Business as a Vocation, Catholic Social Teaching and Business Education. Please join me in welcoming to the microphone His Eminence, Cardinal Peter Turkson.
In Rome, at our dicastery, we happen to be presently engaged in the process of beatification of one of our presidents, Vietnamese Archbishop Cardinal Van Thuan, who used to be the president of our dicastery. So in working on his beatification, we've had to collect a lot of data about his life, person, and all of that. I wasn't quite sure that I'm up for beatification with all the nice things said about me, so don't beatify me yet. Let me say that I bring you, in the first place, warm greetings from the Pontifical Council of Justice and Peace. And on its behalf and its name, we wish this conference great success in everything that it seeks to do this next 3 days. We come with great sentiments of gratitude for the invitation to this university, University of Dayton, and so wish to thank the president, Dr. Daniel Curran, and the organizers of this conference, Reverend Brother Ray Fitz, and Professor Michael Norton. And so all of you, dear friends, gathered here, we greet you all very warmly. And at the Eucharist this morning, we had an opportunity to gather around the table, Eucharistic table, to be fed by the Lord. And then to receive the first indications of why we gathered here and what we seek to do in these next 3 days. My task this afternoon is twofold. To officially present or introduce to you a document which is already in your folders, and then to keynote your work these next 3 days. So first, let me talk about this small booklet that you have in your folders now, Vocation of the Business Leader. And I can share with you a lot of inside stories about this, but we want to save time. We had a big discussion at the cast even about this expression here, reflection. To call it a note, to call it a vademecum, to call it what, and to call it what. And all we chose this word because we wanted to fly below the radar of the Holy See. Because if we had said a note, if we'd call this a note, we would have had to send it to the Holy See, the Vatican Secretary of State, to be reviewed and to be given approval before we could publish it. And we didn't want to go through that, so we said reflection. So that's how it worked. So my first task is to launch this small booklet that you have in your possession, which since its publication and official presentation in Lyon, in France, before a group of Catholic entrepreneurs called UniaPAC, it's made several rounds already. It's been translated into Spanish, Italian, German, Polish, and Chinese. So it's become a very popular document, and I met a bishop the other day in Dublin who said that he did a workshop with the businessmen in his diocese on this document, and they were all greatly enthused by the fact that business for the first time is recognized as a vocation. And that was a big thing for them. So this publication was born out of a workshop that was held in Rome between our office, Pontifical Council of Justice and Peace, on the occasion of a desire to study Caritas in Veritate and the logic of gift and the meaning of business from St. Thomas University and the Ryan Institute in St. Thomas, the St. Thomas University and Ryan Institute, with another group called Ecophilus Foundation. The excellent discussion which took place convinced all the participants that we needed to try to capture the proceedings in an enduring and a permanent form in a booklet, which is this small booklet. So, accordingly, the participants resolved to prepare a kind of an executive handbook or vademecum. And it is my pleasant and happy duty to thank first and foremost Professor Norton, here with us, and Sister Helen Alford, who teaches at the Angelicum in Rome. The two of them, tag team to, prepare the original draft of this, and the very many other experts who were consulted about the content of this small book. We thank them all for the useful work that they did. It proposed the book, Vademecum, the book, Vocation of the Business Leader, a reflection. It just prepares an integral vision and an understanding consistent with the Catholic social doctrine, and especially Caritas in Veritate. It identifies business first and foremost as a vocation, and it provides business leaders with principles and tools for discovering their vocation and deliberately pursuing it so as to live a well-balanced life of enterprise and service. Reflections were not slow in coming when this booklet came out. And in our office, we're collecting all the responses which come. And I just give you the caption or the titles of a few of them. One of them, referring to reviewing this small booklet, begins that by saying, "In praise of business." Another one begins by saying, "Can business save your souls?" Another one begins by saying, "The ethical executive." And then the fourth one, begins by saying, "A Vatican document to make Socrates proud." So to a large extent, responses to the document has been very positive. And that's why it's, we feel encouraged to translate them so very many languages. So it's not just Socrates who will become proud at this. Everyone involved has had reason to be proud of the vocation text and confident that it will really promote the vocation of entrepreneurs and executives to serve God, to serve God's people and the common good. So I hereby officially launch this small booklet, Vocation of the Business Leader, and it is my prayer that it circulates widely and enable businessmen to gradually, introduce their business as a center stage of their own faith, and more increasingly help to bridge the gap that is prevailed between business and faith and business and religion, and to recognize that business people can bring their faith to their business and introduce their faith in the center stage of their activity. So it is our prayer that all of you, having copies of this, would also become disciples of the spread of this document. We're glad for, what to make this, again, a steady material for students, and all of you are invited and welcome to do so. At the end of this, you have a contact for getting some more copies of this in case you need them, from where it is published from, Professor Norton's outfit. It's online on the web, on the internet of the Institute, and you find it also on the internet of the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace. So that is, with the vocation of the business leader, a reflection. And if you do look at it or have any group look at it and you have reflections or reactions, we'll be glad to know. We'll be glad to know what the reactions are, so we can probably eventually think about a second edition of the note. So thank you for having this, and thank you, Michael and Helen, and all the different professors who collaborated with you in the production of this small document. Now to my task, second part of my task over here, to try to keynote the work that we'll be doing here this next 3 days. So coming together to, or being invited to keynote your 3 days meeting over here, an international conference on Catholic social thought and management education. First thing is probably to ask myself, how can, at best, somebody who did a little bit of scripture, and then also was essentially a pastor, the Archbishop of a diocese, and who has never really handled business education or taught students in that regard, how can I keynote this? I derive confidence in doing so only from the fact that the Church's social doctrine are basically keyed in Scripture and the tradition of the Church. On account of that, we decided in preparing this intervention, we decided to do something that is we found very interesting. The approach taken over here is to rely on the maxim that market research sometimes is better than the expression of a simple opinion. So that's what we decided to do. We sent a small note to about 15 professionals and 15 experts and asked them for their view with regard to this topic. So they sent us responses, and the talk I'm about to give is an attempt to put the views expressed by these 15 people that we consulted together. We're now going to be mentioning their names because we promised them all confidential. But the letter that we sent to them is included, and ultimately I hope will become available to this group. The letter we sent to them, asking for their responses, is attached to my note and would ultimately also be made available to you all. So on the basis of this, in the light of, again, vocation, they reflected on mission and identity in Catholic business education. There are many good suggestions are reflected in this address, and accordingly, I propose to explore with you, first, what Catholic business education should comprise of, and secondly, the character of Catholic institutions of business education, and finally, some future possibilities. So first, what Catholic business education should comprise. There is a sentence in Caritas in Veritate that is practically custom-made for the introduction of this part of the address. It says, integral human development is primarily a vocation, and therefore it involves a free assumption of responsibility in solidarity on the part of everyone. And rephrasing this in view of our talk, we might say, engagement in business or entrepreneurship is primarily a vocation, and therefore it involves a free assumption of responsibility in solidarity on the part of everyone involved. And so if business is to do good, then it is because everyone involved strives to do good, especially the leaders, who will prepare them to exercise responsible freedom in their vocation. It is you, the teachers, it is you, the formators, the leaders and the workers in the vineyard of Catholic business of education. So our market research was conclusive. Catholic business education must strive for excellence in all the standard business school topics and go a little bit beyond that to include features that give it its special character. So we're talking about excellence in the study and the teaching of all the topics of business education, but to go one step still further, to strive to reflect the special Catholic character, okay, of their institution. It is this character, this Catholic identity and mission, that is the focus of my address today. And what I wish to share with you are my expectations for those special characteristic features in what an excellent, distinctively Catholic business education would be like and would like to teach. And I like to capture them on the 5 areas. In the area of its foundations, the purpose of business, the vocation of the business leader, the proper conduct in business, and a balanced life. A Catholic business school would be fulfilling its proper mission, which includes acting and teaching in a way that is recognizable as Catholic. If these 5 pillars, namely the foundations, the purpose of business, the vocation of business leader, proper conduct in business, and balanced life, if these 5 pillars sustain and orient its entire programs of studies. So let us explore each of these 5 pillars. First, the foundations. The vocation book explores Christian anthropology and Catholic social teaching. Some readers will have just heard of them. For others, the very existence of such a teaching will come as a surprise. For me, though, they are the core, the foundations or essentials that will help business leaders to navigate on their mission. So your conference, like this small booklet, explores the foundation thoroughly. And let me add a perspective that may be worth reflecting on throughout. The first chapter of the book of Genesis contains 2 phrases which help us formulate the foundations of our business studies. The 2 phrases which are decisive for the foundations are, God created a human being in his own image, and then charged them, Adam and Eve, to fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion over nature. These then would constitute, if you want, 3 basic foundational themes which are worth considering. First, God endowed the human person with freedom and intelligence. Blessed Pope John 23 spells out the meaning in Pacem in Terris when he says, each individual man or person is truly a human being. He is a nature endowed with intelligence and free will. As such, he has rights and he has duties, which together flow as a direct consequence from his nature. Secondly, the account in Genesis says, God gave Adam and Eve the vocation to work and invited them not only to imitate the work he had been doing during the 6 days, but actually to carry on that work in time and on earth, to carry out the divine creativity and to share profoundly in the work of creation. And we may add a third detail, and it is that God rested on the 7th day, and he blessed that day, and he made it holy. And that rest also gives meaning and purpose to work. And it's a detail which may not be skipped over or which may not be just glossed over. So there are three foundational themes from the account of creation. Is God's creation of the human person, endowing him with intelligence and freedom to work. God's charging the human person to work, to have dominion over the earth and continue the creativity of God. And the third detail is the rest of God on the 7th day, and blessing, making it holy, and entrusting it as such to the human person. Which means that rest contributes significantly to the discovery of meaning of work. Thus, we can trace our human dignity, our stewardship, and our responsibility for the common good back to creation, the originating mission event of humankind. So rather than speak further about foundations, let me briefly share with you a small Hebrew story, and then let me also imagine three final questions which may be of use. In the area of describing the foundations of what we do, as in a business school, over and above the account in Genesis establishing our creation in God's image and likeness, and so the endowment to be able to continue the creative work of God, and over and above the term of the Sabbath day being a day of rest, blessed and entrusted as such to the human person, the issue of foundations in Scripture invite us to consider several other passages. I'll just take one because of its great interest. The Jewish people have a story they tell, which is a popular story called the Haggadah. And it is based on Isaiah chapter 51, where Abraham is referred to as a rock, out of which they were cut, and a quarry out of which they were dug. In that passage then, Isaiah refers to the people of Israel to look to Abraham, their father, because Abraham becomes the rock and the quarry out of which the people of Israel were cut. So if they have anything, they should relate to Abraham. Now, when the Jewish scholars are looking at that passage, they come up with an interesting story saying that when God wanted to create the world, he looked and saw that humanity would turn against him. And so God almost gave up with his plan to create the world and the human race, until he saw Abraham. And when he saw Abraham, he saw in Abraham someone who was meant to be a rock on which to create the world and the human race. And with the vision or with the sight of Abraham, God had the courage to go on and create, because Abraham was going to be the rock on which to found the human race and creation. And this story, the constitution of Abraham as a rock, is tied to another episode or story in the book of Genesis, where three angels on the way to Sodom and Gomorrah to destroy it met Abraham. And then the visitors tell the story that they could not keep their mission from Abraham, because Abraham was chosen to teach his children the path of justice and righteousness on the earth. So the Haggadah brings these two episodes together and considers Abraham as a rock of humanity and race, because he is charged to teach his children, the path of righteousness, and the path of justice. Which just means that the constitution of Abraham as a foundation for the people of Israel is precisely because Abraham is the one who will teach his children and humanity the path of justice and the path of righteousness. That's a Haggadah, a popular story told about the Jews, but that has to do with foundations. Now, let me conclude this small bit with a series of, some 3 small questions which may be a guide, that can serve as a kind of a guide. So a first question may be, in what ways can a business leader or manager call for work from a colleague or employer without objectifying that person? That means without offending or violating the image and the likeness in the person, so his dignity, his freedom, and his personhood. Second question can be, what sorts of industries or business pursuits should a Catholic not engage in, and why not? Why would participation in such a business be a direct participation in evil or an exploitation or a violation of the human person? And a third lead question or guiding question can be, how should a Catholic CEO calibrate legitimate returns for investors and senior staff, including compensation for him or for her, in relations to other considerations? These are 3 short questions that can follow from this first part of the foundations. The second pillar that we may talk about is the purpose of business. Having mentioned the anthropological foundation of business, I turn now to its purpose. If I were now to disparage business, if I were to call it basically amoral or even a necessary evil, you, my audience, would rightly be shocked. But other gatherings have both sent and received such negative messages. The church has at times said, or at least hinted at business as less worthy of the human person. For example, the state of the priesthood is sometimes considered to be a worthier vocation than business, and sometimes even the professions like law and medicine are extolled even over simple business. And again, referring to the Jewish tradition, in Judaism, the study of the Torah is far more important than any other engagement that anybody may commit himself to. So in some Hasidic communities, it's the woman who works. The man spends his time studying the Torah, studying the Bible, the Word of God. That is the most, if you want, the loftiest, business. But all of this needs to change, because business is indeed a noble pursuit. From what we've said about, the foundations, it's a way that the human person continues the mandate entrusted to him by God himself at creation. At its best and most true to its nature and potential, business serves the common good. And from this, we may draw out four facets of this, of business serving the common good. The first is, business is a way of the human person carrying on the co-creation act which God entrusted to him. So business is co-creation. Those in business have the privilege and duty to prolong and to collaborate in God's continuing creation. Business entrepreneurship is a genuine calling from God, a calling to be a co-creator in a responsible way, thereby contributing to the unfolding of God's design in the world. The second facet of business is that it is a service. Service to humanity, service to humankind. Business actively is inherently oriented to the other. Thus, it exercises the Christian ideal of serving others, serving stakeholders of all sorts, and thereby contributing to the common good. Thirdly, business is also an expression of solidarity. We are social beings with responsibility for others, responsible to help them grow, responsible to help them prosper, and responsible to help them excel. Solidarity, then, according to Pope John Paul II, is not just a feeling of some vague compassion towards another. It is essentially a firm and a persevering determination to commit oneself to the common good. Solidarity and responsibility, then, are related. Jesus gave us the outstanding example of solidarity in the parable of the Good Samaritan, which is both a parable and a self-portrait of our Savior. By itself, however, the Good Samaritan story presents just one side of solidarity. It should be complemented by another parable, the parable of the master who, living on a journey, entrusted his talents to his servants. On his return, the 3 servants who received the talents came to render account. And he was pleased with the first 2 who had earned a return, but not with the third one who simply buried the gold to keep it safe. This suggests that everyone must take appropriate responsibility with their own lives, whatever the circumstances. Refusing to accept responsibility, refusing to take initiative, is in itself irresponsible. Business should express solidarity in both ways: care for victims of misfortune and collaboration in the efforts of those who strive to take responsibility for others and for themselves. The 4th facet we can talk about is sustainability. Business must respect creation, the surrounding society, and the need and the rights of future generations. In this sense, Pope Benedict XVI speaks about intergenerational solidarity in his encyclical Caritas in Veritate, expressing the responsibility that we have towards future generations. Decisions should not be short-term and exploitative, but long-term and sustainable. So, co-creation, service, solidarity, and sustainability in an overall noble purpose of improving lives in various ways is the character of business. Without the agency of business, human invention and energy would not be able to transform the world's resources into countless benefits. By producing products that are truly good and offering services that truly serve, and by doing so at a competitive price, a business benefits clients while providing just financial returns for investors, just wages for employees, and just prices to suppliers, and just tax revenues to the government and the state. All this contributes to the national economy and to human progress. And we would add to the coming also of God's kingdom. So business in and by itself is a means and a tool. Therefore, moral issues about means and tools are actually questions about those who use those tools and who use those means. Therefore, it is of critical importance to have mature business leaders to ensure that businesses make good on their great opportunity to create wonderful benefits for human life. Such leaders must not focus on any single dimension of business to the exclusion of other dimensions. A failure to understand this has the potential to derail this noble pursuit. Such has been the failure with the unilateral and indeed, if sometimes even myopic, embrace of their profit motive. Profit is a useful measure of the efficient allocation of resources. It is also an essential input for a company to be sustainable, a bit like oxygen for a human person. It is not the purpose of human life, but you would need and you would quickly die without it. Yet life is more than oxygen, and business is more than profit. Here, Pope Benedict again comes to shed light on the situation for us. In critiquing the maximization of profit in business as the sole criterion for action, the Pope says this: once profit becomes the exclusive focus, if it is produced by improper means and without the common good as its prosperity, and indeed it rather creates poverty. So if you like the oxygen questions about foundation, if you like the exam questions about foundation, we can throw in one more question over here, and it is: how should a business inspired by Catholic social teaching combine making money and making a difference? How can a business inspired by Catholic social teaching make money and at the same time make a difference? The third pillar, that is the vocation of the business. Engaging in business is a noble vocation, as we've said. Every business enterprise is a unique and evolving cluster of relationship. And the role of the executive, the manager or administrator, is to take care for and to nurture the relationships among stakeholders. The business leader's task is to make sure that communication between everyone is sufficient and it is constructive, that each participant has the opportunity to develop personally and professionally, and that the harmony of the whole cluster of relationship is not only safeguarded but also enhanced. Understanding what everyone's needs are in order to be able to organize, evaluate, and improve all the relationships is the bread and the butter of business education. The usual view is that stakeholders include owners, investors, employees, clients, and suppliers. But our essential adjective Catholic adds the challenge of universality to this. It challenges business leaders to stretch beyond the company walls and include ever-widening concentric circles until they embrace the whole human family, including even those who are not yet born. So the stakeholders in business then are not only the owners, the investors, employees, clients, and suppliers. They include some more. And they include some more in response to the nature of the church as a universal entity, including even, as we've said, those who are not even yet born. And this becomes sometimes an expression of our intergenerational solidarity. So to protect the inalienable dignity of all human beings, to enhance the integral human flourishing of all, the development of the whole man and of all men, of all human beings, as Pope Paul VI and Benedict XVI put it, and to enhance everybody's opportunity to seek for fullness of life, this is the scope of business. All this means living out one's vocation in a way that contributes to the society in which one operates locally and well beyond. In this connection, I think again of Jesus and his parable of the Good Shepherd, because the shepherd is a traditional figure of leadership, but it's also a figure of stewardship. When the terrain is familiar, the shepherd walks behind the flock to make sure that no one strays and no one is left behind. That would be a good business leader who keeps in mind the needs and the abilities of all his stakeholders, not leaving any of them out from benefiting from the business they are involved in. But at other times, when the terrain is difficult and dangerous, the shepherd walks in front of the sheep, seeking out a safe path to green pasture. This too would be a good business leader, assessing the changing conditions, taking huge risks, calculating what the risks entail, breaking into unknown and new terrain, and always leading by example. So the shepherd imagery provides two images for the business leader. to go behind the sheep, to lead those going astray and bring them all together, but sometimes also to go ahead and in front of the sheep, to mark out for the sheep the path along which to walk. Besides the Good Shepherd, I also think of Jesus washing the feet of the disciples. Whoever wishes to lead must also serve. And then I also think of his concern for Martha. In the story in the Gospel of Luke, for her to flourish fully, Martha should join in the learning and the discussion session and not just prepare the meal. Limiting herself to just preparing the meal, she misses out. So Martha should also learn every now and then to also join the learning and the discussion session and not simply, self-preparing the meal. So with this imagery then, we can also, formulate a question, a lead question, which can be, how can one discuss how a Catholic business leader could exercise his or her vocation in a particular business setting of your choosing? What are the important dimensions that must be addressed? What means could the leader use to improve relationship and enhance human flourishing or human prosperity? The fourth pillar, the proper conduct in business. The proper conduct of a business leader is informed by his or her ethics, by her character, and by his or her worldview. This is why it is important that we not only teach new leaders the tasks and the best practices of business, we must also help them to develop a moral compass, what will enable them to find the right solutions even when in uncharted territory. What helps the business leader grasp what is good is a well-formed character and a mature faith. The ability to call upon the good habits of thought, choice, and action that would help future entrepreneurs to become good men and women capable of addressing the ethical and economic challenges which they face every day in a coherent way. Many choices today are presented as either or and therefore conflict-driven. Profit or social impact, workforce versus management, North against the South, poor against the rich. The solutions are therefore often one-sided and gives the impression that the solutions are always like winner takes it all. Our faith as Catholics offers a different approach. It is not an either-or approach, which tends to oppose the different segments and the different elements. We may think about one symbol that we deal with regularly in our lives, the Eucharist. The Eucharist is body and blood, bread and wine. Not body or blood, or bread or wine, but bread and wine. And this is not an either-or situation. At first glance, these seem to be mutually exclusive states. But with the eye and the reason of our faith, it becomes a wonderful both and. What is perceived to be opposed becomes a beautiful and a complementary unity. And therefore wish to encourage you to use this ancient insight of our Mother Church and apply it to your teaching and research. It seems to me then that the both-and approach of the Church makes for very good strategy in many areas of life, and that reconciling what others perceive as opposites can be a great business strategy sometimes. In addition, far too many situations nowadays are seen through a prism of conflict. It seems that every contact is based on conflict. Every interaction a zero-sum game that demands a winner and a loser. Again, that is fundamentally opposed to Christian worldview. Christ is Lord of all. God is the creator of the universe and the source of all. The gifts are many, but the Spirit is one. So St. Paul describes the church as the body of Christ, where many parts form one body. So we can use this as an analogy for the entire human family. Our interactions then are not designed for conflict. God meant them to be complementary, to be productive, to be fruitful, and to be peaceful. God did not create a universe with conflict on his mind, but with peace and with harmony. Thus, our interactions, be they economic, civic, or personal, are not aimed at winner takes it all, but at win-win collaboration. We need each other like the body needs every part. I believe that using the collaboration view rather than the conflict view as a guide in your business teaching and research has great potential and will bear a lot of fruit. One of the most appreciated features of this small booklet, The Vocation, is its appendix, entitled Discernment Checklist for Business Leaders. Here, in the form of 30 questions, you find an examination of conscience informed by Catholic social teaching. In such a discernment or self-examination, one asks, in the light of the ideals and the values embraced, have I done well, enough, or is there room for improvement? Where I have failed, how can I reverse the failure? And of course, your ethics instruction would alert students to the difference between a Christian ethics or virtue and character and other approaches, some well-intentioned but limited, others downright cynical, as we didn't get caught, so everything is well. With that in mind, your exam questions could then take the form, describe a serious ethical dilemma in a business setting of your choice, and indicate how you might defend a decision based on Christian moral principles that differs from suggestions and justifications offered by other value frameworks. The fifth pillar that we may talk about is a balanced life. Business schools teach a way to make a living. Catholic business schools also teach how to live a good life. Two different things. Difference slight but significant. Business schools teach a way to make a living. Catholic business schools should teach a way to teach how to live a good life. Good leadership starts with leading a good life. Living authentically is the cornerstone of good leadership. And that cannot happen if the leader is unsure of his or her vocation in life. Helping in this search is one of the key advantages of Catholic business, that Catholic business schools can provide to its students. I'm happy, therefore, to see many of your schools focusing on growth in faith and character, development, and helping students to explore and find their vocation. Living out one's discovered vocation requires a balance. No one leaves school intending to have a bad marriage or a broken set of relationship with their children and with their parents, but it does happen, all too often as a result of an unbalanced life. Being pulled in very many directions and spending most of their waking hours at work, many of our colleagues lose sight of what is really important to them and find themselves without the strength to change the course of their lives. If you want, there is no Sabbath in their lives. In educating your students, please also help them learn how to seek balance in life. Remind them of the Sabbath, and for example of what Ecclesiastes chapter 3 would say, there is a time for everything under the sun. There's a time for family and friends, and there's also time for oneself. There's a time for recreation and relaxation, but there's also time for physical and spiritual exercise. There's time for an active parish life, and there is a time also for volunteer service. It is in the balance of these aspects with work that we find meaning and joy. Leaders in particular are called upon to provide their organizations with the inspiration for that balance, which they do more in action than by dispensing advice. For one cannot give what one does not have. Here, your task of educating the next generation of leaders is very crucial, not only to the economy, but also to our community, to our church, to our families. Well-balanced lives are expressed in self-gift. Leaders who give of themselves continually seek out ways in which to contribute through their company efforts, as well as through volunteering their time, talents, and treasure. This is the true sign of the servant leader. I know that you probably expect another final exam question after this, but I'll skip it. Instead of final exam question like we've been doing in the earlier pillars, what I would wish to do after this fourth pillar is that the graduating student meets with their mentor or counselor every now and then and reflect on the balance and the imbalance that they have experienced in their lives so far, and plan seriously for how they will maintain balance in the future. In other words, I'm suggesting the thing of mentoring and the thing of monitoring people even after their graduation. Having seen these 5 pillars on which Catholic business education can stand, I'd like now to draw attention to a few things which may be referred to as characteristics, okay, of Catholic business education institutions. And these may be the following: alignment of structure and process with the Catholic social doctrine. It goes nearly without saying, a school must practice what it preaches. It must operate in a manner that is consistent with Catholic social teaching. And so let me simply list 6 spheres of aligned practices. For example, in the mission statement of the school, this should be boldly, explicitly, and faithfully Catholic. It can also go with a selection of faculty and selection of facilities. Then it is also to be experienced sometime in the operational policies and the practices of the school. Then it can also be made manifest in the syllabus and the curriculum priorities of the school. Fifthly, it can also be made manifest in the course content, the materials and the teaching methods, connecting with real-life Catholic business leaders, via case studies, internship, and mentoring would also be of great help in this regard. And sixthly, a feature that can also, a characteristic of a Catholic social, so can be engagement with the wider community. Because schools normally, as you know, engage alumni to elicit financial support. This connection has other potential. The vocation of the business leader provides excellent material for discussion groups. So schools should probably reach out to the alumni in business to network and to help each other to align their professional and personal lives with the Catholic social thought. Schools then can reach beyond the alumni, for instance, through Catholic associations. Here in the United States, the Legatus, Knights of Malta, Knights of Columbus, Sarah Club, and others to be introduced to these same, ideas and the content of the Church's social doctrine. So along with its mission statement and curriculum, such walk the talk would also help to distinguish the Catholic Business School from other institutions. Like earlier topics, I end this one with a small examination question, but not for students. Instead, I'm thinking of good management practices such as performance measurement, after-action review, and strategic renewal. So this self-examination question can run like this. What can we do to improve how we evaluate our own work? Do we gather reliable information on whether we are meeting our standards of excellence, and on whether we are perceived to be fulfilling our mission or not? How can we use the findings to raise our level of performance in fulfillment of our Catholic identity and our Catholic mission? A big feature which this document talks about and which I like to take up as also a task of Catholic business schools is the ability to discern and to prophesy. This also is a competence that belongs to Catholic business schools, to discern, reading the signs of the times, and to prophesy. When Pope Benedict, Pope John the 23rd, read the signs of the times in 1963, he discerned a growing preference for negotiations between nations, but at the same time, the perpetuation of fear and mistrust. His prophetic call then was for a fairer relationship of one of the cardinal duties deriving from our common nature, namely that love and not fear must dominate the relationship between individuals and between nations. This was during the Cold War period. His successors have kept at this providential habit, and whoever reads the signs of the times will recognize this. Not just the Pope or the dicasteries in Rome need to identify and to interpret the signs of the times. It is the entire church which has the task and the duty of interpreting and reading the signs of the times. And that means that Catholic business schools can also read and interpret the signs of the times. So we call on Catholic business professionals and educators and scholars to discern and to prophesy in your various areas of competence. Use Catholic social doctrine as your lens for seeing. Use Catholic tradition as your criteria for judging. Follow the ancient Catholic tradition of applying faith and reason in your quest. Look, for example, at the dualism in our culture today. The spiritual and the physical realms are more and more separated from each other. We must overcome the separation between faith and daily life. We must overcome the separation between faith and business. We must overcome the separation between faith and reason. This separation leads to grave injustices and falsehood. So judge whether the economy exists for the human person or the human person for the economy. If the latter, then we must speak and act prophetically so that business endeavors and overall economy might properly serve the human flourishing of individuals and of all in the community. Individually and collectively, we must dare to see and judge. We must dare to see and judge. Indeed, shortcomings in business and in economic and financial systems. And then let us act. It is for us to apply the Catholic principles of both ends, of complementarity, of servant leadership, in order to bring understanding, reconciliation, and progress to the most thorny issues of our time. The need for rebalancing in the economy between profit on the one hand and social and environmental concern on the other is of paramount importance. And above all, let us express Christian charity in our seeing, judging, and acting. In this prophetic vein, let me then cite some very good advice from my fellow Cardinal, the Cardinal in charge of interreligious dialogue. Having gone to France about 3 weeks ago to celebrate the feast of St. Joan of Arc, Cardinal Turkson shared this insight. Let us not be afraid to be different, to swim against the tide. We cannot be a light in the darkness without posing questions to others. We cannot be Christians while making a pact with darkness. It is not true that the sure way to serve the nation in politics and public debate is to vilify one's opponent. It is not true that in business, financial and technical criteria alone should guide economic choices, ignoring their human consequences. Our faith is not a conclusion. Our faith is rather the point of departure. Here again, my suggested question are for academics and administrative leaders. How then are we carrying out our prophetic role of regularly discerning the challenges in business, the economy, and the society around us, leading to advocacy and action to do the right thing? How do we support others in this role? So, my dear friends, so far, we've identified 5 characteristics of a church business education, which I can now express as qualities, or if you want, even adjectives. Catholic business education should be well-founded, purposeful, vocational, ethical, and formative. We went on then to explore institutional characteristics which are to be learned in Catholic social teaching and practice in engaging the science of the times. Now let us look at future possibilities. The strength of the vocation document and the program of your conference fills me with a lot of hope. I'm sure that your 3 days here will spawn fresh initiatives and renewed enthusiasm for your schools. Clearly, there is much to apply in institutional policies, curriculum design, and teaching, and many worldwide possibilities for research. So allow me then to suggest some options linked with areas that are familiar to me. The first, it would be good to see studies that develop Catholic thought relevant to business, such as theology of work, based on theology of the body, research to show that moral business is good business, the elaboration of sound spirituality of work and of entrepreneurship. 2, although codes of ethics date back at least to the Hippocratic Oath, nowadays they are burgeoning in professions and organizations. Every profession and organization is developing some kind of ethical oath or conduct. Of necessity, such codes embody assumptions about human nature and ethical reasoning. It might be very hopeful and very helpful both to business people and to ethics experts to have guides based on the compendium, for example, of the social doctrine of the church, to help them in critiquing other codes of ethics and in developing practical guidelines applying Catholic faith and doctrine. And such critiques and guidelines can be tailored to a specific domain of economic activity, the energy sector, the natural resources sector, and the services sector. This is very much in the spirit of the new evangelization, which focuses not so much on places which have been de-Christianized as on areas of life which are crying out to be evangelized. 3, in terms of approach, there is great promise in creating networks of all stakeholders in Catholic business education. Taking advantage of communication technologies these days, networking can share best practices, for example, develop open sources of resources, and share educational material such as case studies and courses. Networking can prolong the very sorts of creative interchange which will take place during this conference, as indeed it did in the conference of the vocation document for a year after the Logic of Gift seminar in February 2011. And my final suggestion is in the style of a group assignment. For you in business education, together with us in the Pontifical Council, how can we help one another? How can we collaborate? And how should we go about collaborating and doing and working together? In conclusion then, my dear friends, I'd like to say this. This has become a touchstone in the thinking of our recent popes. Integral human development. It's become something that the popes of late have begun to talk about. The encouragement to consider everything in the service of the human person, considered not as an individual and considered not simply as a body, but as body and soul and with other people. Integral, then, has a good number of opposites, including compartmentalized, peripheral, diffuse, isolated, disconnected, and even contradictory. A great temptation of academic institutions is isolation, where different specialities compete and refuse to talk with each other. A little bit of this exists among the dicasteries in Rome, which we're trying to overcome. Each one holding his office to his chest. But gradually we begin to see how we can collaborate and work together. But the great temptation of academic institutions is precisely that isolation, where different specialties compete and refuse to talk to each other. The same syndrome is one of the factors in economic crisis. Different institutions fail to communicate. Different specialized functions fail to collaborate while hiding behind the excuse, it is not my role, I'm just doing my job. We witness a lot in the present economic crisis when we began to talk to some bank officials and some well-placed people in the financial world. So many respondents to our market research urge that there be integration across the curriculum. The main example was ethics. This should not be a single isolated course, but an integral part of all subjects. I did not mention this earlier. I was saving it for now, for dramatic effect if you want. And I want to take it further. Integration not only in your teaching, but also with how your institutions or your institution behaves and how it carries out its prophetic role. Without that sort of consistency, that integration, that your institution will not be in a position to model, credibly promote, and achieve integral human development. If anyone thinks that integral human development is just another isolated specialty or merely a hedge against nervous breakdown and things like that, you can remind them of the business that the Second Vatican Council wants. The Second Vatican Council reminds us all about holiness, and it invites all of God's people to this. And it says, all of God's people must follow in the footsteps of Christ and conform themselves to his image, seeking the will of the Father in all things. They must devote themselves with all their being to the glory of God and the service of their neighbor. In this way, the holiness of the people of God will grow into an abundant harvest of good, as is admirably shown by the life of so many saints in the church's history. So this universal Christian vocation to holiness can be focused by re-quoting the sentence adapted from Caritas in Veritate, with which we started this whole presentation. Engagement in business or entrepreneurship is primarily a vocation, and therefore it involves a free assumption of responsibility in solidarity on the part of everyone involved. The publication leader arose from questions and insights of concerned Catholic business educators and practitioners, and from the social magisterium of the Church. May this collaboration continue with the guidance of the Holy Spirit during the present conference and beyond. And may your sharing of views and experiences from your various institutions this next 3 days avail unto all of us with the sharpening of a definition of our identity and mission, or the sharpening of focus for what we all have to do. Thank you.
Your Eminence, Cardinal Turkson, and ladies and gentlemen, it's truly an honor to be able to reflect with you today on the words of Cardinal Turkson in this keynote address. I have had the pleasure of meeting Cardinal Turkson at lunch today and having conversation with him, and I assure you that everything that was said about him in the introduction is true. I don't know about the sainthood, but I do know about the internal glow of a good person. I also want to say that I'm especially honored to be here today on the occasion of introducing this work in its English language edition. I was going to say at the beginning that I think this represents several milestones, and I think it does, by the way, but I'm not going to emphasize the first milestone, which was a milestone for the church, because since it's flying under the radar, I'm going to keep this quiet and just be glad that it's out. But I think it also represents a milestone for the men and women who have been involved with these conferences through the years, trying to bring people from various colleges around the country, around the world together to talk about Catholic education. Through my years at St. Thomas, I have to say that we've engaged very strongly in the question of what's the identity and mission of a Catholic university. And in some ways, I credit the strength and life of that conversation to the business faculty at St. Thomas, who have been engaged, at least some of us, in an ongoing conversation related to the mission of Catholic education, or of business education in a Catholic university. So I do think it's a milestone document, and in one other way, it is particularly a milestone for faithful men and women who have discovered and used their gifts in business, and who have heard a new kind of affirmation of their work in this document. Not only an affirmation, but challenge and hope that their labor can, as the document says, contribute greatly, not only to the material, but to the spiritual well-being of society. I know that there are many perspectives represented in this room, but hopefully there is one shared desire that our work here in Dayton may add to that spiritual well-being as well. So I've had the advantage of being able to read Cardinal Turkson's keynote address in advance and to think about it for several days in preparation for these comments. As I pondered Cardinal Turkson's work, I found myself going through 3 phases of thinking, not so much in parallel to the Cardinal's 3 sections, and not even in linear order, really. That is, my thoughts move in and out of these stages as I think about what he has offered us here today. I go back and forth among these stages, the first being inspiration, the second being hesitation, and the third progress. So in a way, Brother Ray, I'm having a conversation with myself, and hope that you'll indulge me as I do this and just let you know some of the things I've been thinking about. The first phase is inspiration and a response to the vision that Cardinal Turkson is painting here, where there is a beautiful kind of harmony, an inviting harmony in this idea of how Catholic business and education might work. Yes, I say to myself, foundation, purpose, conduct, content, and balance do capture the necessary components of Catholic business education. And yes, I say to particular parts of this vision, to business as a noble pursuit, and to the great capacity for good that business can do. And yes to the servant leader, and yes to the ethics of business ethics, not merely being a responsive posture, dealing with ethical dilemmas as they arise, but a proactive posture, asking what we can do, what more we can do to make our work and our institutions truly a gift to the common good. And absolutely yes to the balanced life, to the integrated life that is the solution to some of the most painful, divisive, isolating situations facing individuals, families, and communities in our culture. I find myself inspired as well by the harmony suggested in the brief outline of operating concerns for business. A robust Catholic mission, contributing faculty, curricula, and evaluation that row harmoniously in the same direction. But then comes the second phase of thinking, hesitation. The kind of hesitation represented in a phrase that is a perennial part of the background of every discussion about the challenge of business education, at least in my institution, and that is finding the proper balance between theory and practice. The theory is good, I say to myself, but how will it actually look in practice? Hesitation is full of questions, reality checks, head scratching, and midnight oil. Business leaders are, above all, practitioners who live in the gritty world of cash flows, yes, but don't have what we need, the customer wants it now, and of regulators and laws and taxes. This is a phase of healthy skepticism, I tell myself. Remembering experience, analysis, and a search for deeper understanding is a good thing. In this phase, all of my questions and doubts arise. They start with my students at the University of St. Thomas and in my classroom. Who are we educating? Who am I educating, I ask myself. And can I generalize about them? Are the MBA students all alike? Are they even interested in the Catholic tradition or my Catholic university beyond the MBA which they can earn there? Are they fitting their education into a life of work and family? Do they have any interest in theology, philosophy, or Catholic business education? If we offer it, will they come? Or perhaps my students are undergraduates, but are they Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist, Muslim, agnostic? I have all of these people in my class. How do I speak across the faith traditions represented in my classroom? How do I reach out to those busy young minds and find room for thinking about things Catholic when they are worried about mounting debt, about finding internships, and eventually jobs? Will the Catholic difference that we offer really make a difference to their employers? And what about those who are in here for business education but prefer to leave the rest alone? My questions move now to challenges. I have wonderful colleagues enthused about a Catholic mission because at least in recent years we have tried to hire faculty who understand and share that enthusiasm. At the same time, some of my faculty are indifferent to this. There may even be a few who are hostile to it. Is there a way to bring them on board? What kinds of curricular changes will that support? Will they dismiss these efforts as tilting at windmills when we should be doing more finance or more technology or more globalizing? And how will AACSB look at it? Then there are the businesses. Are we preparing our students? Am I preparing my students to work in family businesses, small businesses, private, public, globally based? Are these highly regulated businesses? Do they welcome the kind of diversity that includes Catholic social thought? How do they develop leaders in these businesses, and what do they expect of them? How can we shape and convey the Catholic principles in a Catholic business education that will help our students rise to leadership and operate effectively as leaders no matter where they work? And so the questions pass and the phases pass, and I'm in and out with my thinking on this. Some of you may have some of the same questions today, and more besides, and I have no doubt that you will have opportunities to talk about these over the next 2 days. I remember that this is what these conferences, past and present, are about, and it is what they need, and it is why they need to include all of us, the teaching authority of the church, academic leaders, and business people too. And it is also why we need to be an ecumenical group, which we are, reaching across faith traditions, seeking authentic conversation, finding common ground to shape education capable of carrying the principles of Catholic social thought. It seems that part of our quest must be to find the language that can accomplish this. And it strikes me when I'm in this phase of thinking that getting on with business requires 3 things of me, and perhaps it requires these things of you. First, personal conversion and reconversion. a daily reminder that I am called to do for some good purpose, and that what I am called to do is for some good purpose, and that I am asked to do more than to simply be a spectator sitting on the sidelines. Second, it requires, as the Focolare says so beautifully, that I be the first to love, that I not wait for someone in the classroom, in my university, or in business to love me, but that I love them first by speaking the truth about what I see and what I think business can be. And finally, it reminds me that I cannot sacrifice the perfect for the good, and that after all, what is required of me today is progress, not perfection. While I am hopeful that in the next 2 days we may have many moments together of insight and maybe even some of perfection, I don't know if that will happen, but I am certain that with the minds and goodwill and hard work represented here, that these next 2 days will offer progress. As Cardinal Turkson so aptly concluded in his remarks, I'm quoting from Caritatis and Veritate, engagement in business or entrepreneurship is primarily a vocation, and therefore it involves a free assumption of responsibility in solidarity on the part of everyone involved. And in solidarity then, thank you, and may the next 3 days be truly blessed for all of us.